Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you guys so much for clicking on this video. If you would be so kind to share or like this video, that would be greatly appreciated. Today is going to be a little bit different. I wanted to talk about relying on God and seeking silence and how those things kind of come together. You can see my background's a little bit different today. I'm in nature. I really wanted to be outside because I hear the birds chirping and it's so beautiful, and I just didn't want to do this video inside because it feels like that would be a little bit of an injustice. Becoming Orthodox has made me more aware of who I am, and let me kind of explain that. I am God's creation. We are all God's creation. I think about pottery in this instance. So I took up pottery one summer, and in the process of making any piece, your hands are inevitably forming this piece on the wheel, and your fingerprints are um, are in the potter, or in the piece. And so sometimes you can, whether you see it or not, sometimes you can't really see your fingerprints while you're making the piece, but sometimes you can, and so you have to go in and kind of buff those pieces out, those imperfections, if you will. And think of that in relation to how God makes us, how the Lord forms us, and it's like a pottery piece. He's formed us uh, uniquely and one at a time, and He puts so much love and care into making us. And inevitably, His fingerprints are all over us because we are His creation. And if you're watching this and maybe you're an atheist, sorry to tell you this, but you are still God's creation. You don't get to decide whether or not you are God's creation. You just are, because you're human and He's made you in His image. I think that that is a very beautiful thing to remember and understand. In the Bible, we're given a lot of guidelines, and some people can kind of think that these guidelines or these rules are made to kind of keep us from having fun in life. But in reality, we know that just as a parent creates rules for us, we know it's because it's out of their love and their interest, their best interest for us to have these rules in place so we're protected and safe. So the same thing goes for how the Lord has given us guidelines to live our lives here on earth. But the Apostle Paul says something really poignant in Ephesians, and I'm going to read it to you guys. It says, "We battle not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities and the powers and the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." I think about how many Christians generally think that spiritual warfare or spiritual attacks are kind of just these things that we can brush off, or they're not really real tangible things because we can't see them. Maybe they're just not as real as we may think. And I have met a lot of Christians who don't really fully understand or grasp the seriousness of spiritual warfare. But like I said, Paul is really emphasizing this, and he's using his words intentionally and deliberately in this passage. I do personally believe that in this day and age, we are in this constant spiritual warfare. Jesus amplifies this in 1 John, and he says, "And we know that we are of God, and the whole world lieth in wickedness." So let's just kind of stop for a moment. The whole world lieth in wickedness. Not just America, not just one state. The whole world lies in wickedness. That's a lot. That is a lot to take in. Our world is constantly creating distractions away from God, away from our families, away from our spiritual lives. Every time I'm on my phone, I am just bombarded with these ads. Always something to sell me something and it's always disguised as like this self-care or self-help product that is going to somehow make your life better or easier. This need to overconsume and buy everything that an influencer brings out or a celebrity comes out with. It's this loop of being force-fed things that you really didn't ask for. And while we can consume, it does not mean that we're going to feel any less lonely. In fact, there's been multiple studies about how we are the loneliest we've ever been. It's this dopamine rush that just creates this really vicious cycle and keeps us wanting to go back for more and more and more, thinking that the outcome is going to be different if we keep feeding into it, or I guess you could say keep consuming whatever is being fed to us by the world. And this isn't just with, when I say consuming, I don't just mean um, things that you're buying or products that people are pushing on you. I also mean what we're listening to, who we're listening to. The music in this generation has been uh, completely perverted in so many ways. It's filled with very harsh language and this over sexualization, and it's only hurting our culture. It's not making us better, it's not making us more diverse or healthier at all. It makes me think about how sin can seem pleasurable in the moment and fun and exciting, yet over time it just degrades us mentally, spiritually, and even physically. We are eroding ourselves, our inner selves, by continuously choosing these distractions. I've noticed as a society, we've just become very uncomfortable with silence. Ironically, that is how we find God, is through silence. And I don't believe that it's a coincidence that the world promotes noise while we need silence in order to find God. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect at not giving into distractions. I fall into temptation and I become distracted by things because well, for a lot of reasons. Maybe I just don't want to deal with my reality or the things that are stressing me out. So I might choose to uh, watch a video on YouTube or listen to music. And while I don't think that all music is bad, I don't think every YouTube video is bad, there has to be this self examination where we're saying, am I watching this or listening to this to numb myself or genuinely appreciate what this person has to say or what this music is conveying? I think of like classical music is like always conveying this type of raw beauty compared to maybe more modern music where, like I said, it's mostly very harsh and over sexualized. However, this is where free will enters the conversation. We can choose to follow God or turn away. Being a Christ follower isn't easy. Makes me think of this saying that dead fish go with the flow. I'm sure some of you have probably heard of that. Although the original meaning was to think more independently and to challenge oneself, I think it applies to us Christians as well. We need to self examine the way that we live our lives, the way that we seek out noise instead of silence. Abba Moses said, "Stay in your cell, and your cell will teach you everything." Meaning that while the world pushes this idea uh, that thinks stillness and silence is obsolete or boring, perhaps even a waste of time, seeking this silence brings forth a multitude of blessings in our lives. Analyzing ourselves can lead to repentance and in turn cultivate peace in our lives. And I want to reiterate that I am not perfect with this, and I'm definitely trying harder to get away from the noise and the distraction, and in order to find more peace and stillness, to find God. So, what am I doing currently to do that? So, I would like to share some things that I'm doing currently to cultivate that peace. A way that I think that I'm trying to cultivate this in my life, and some of these might seem a little silly, maybe, maybe not. Um, but one of them is gardening. I started to pick up gardening and I want to really invest a little bit more time in it just because I think that it holds such a symbolism in how the Lord plants seeds in us and how we ourselves can bear fruit, good fruit, if we are seeking the Lord. We plant the seeds, but the Lord is the one who brings it to the surface and allows it to bloom. And in that process, there is silence because you have to wait for things to come out of the ground. And you also have to wait to harvest. I've forgotten how to just wait and be still. Another thing is relearning cursive. I've grew up and I would write cursive, but I've kind of forgotten how to write cursive in which it is legible. So I am picking back up cursive, and I'm teaching or trying to teach my brain to take my time when I am writing. And it's such a beautiful thing to write in cursive. It's such a pretty thing to look at, but it also takes time, and it allows you to think a little bit more because you're not just like scribbling as fast as you can. You're being intentional. Of course, prayer is a really big thing, so saying the Jesus prayer as much and as often as possible. So throughout my day, while I'm at work or whatever I am doing, to just say it in my head as many times as possible, or if I'm on a walk, saying it, whether it's out loud or whether it's in my head. I think that this really creates this kind of almost like a meditation feeling that we kind of single our mind to one thing. We focus our mind on one thing. And I believe that the Bible talks about that. I don't remember the verse, but it's basically talks about how to be of like a single-mindedness for the Lord. Lastly, what I'm trying to do to kind of use my time a little bit more productively is to read books that either talk about church history or explain the teachings in a little bit of a simpler way. I would love to hear what some of your suggestions would be for me, or perhaps things that you've done in your life that can cultivate stillness in our lives. I'm going to wrap up this video here, but thank you guys so much for watching. Look forward to hearing from y'all and your comments and your suggestions. And of course, last but not least, Christ is risen.